So welcome everyone to our last class of the term. What I thought we'd do today is a bunch of you submitted stories. So I want to discuss those and give each other feedback. And then depending on timing, we might have time to do some more debugging in case there's additional questions that people have. And then I have a few comments I want to close with. Yes, Allison.
I was wondering whether we could do this to a vote, since I'm sure a lot of people have debugging questions. If it was possible, maybe if we could watch the videos on our own time and then submit comments or something in Slack for each person, and then instead use the time collectively for debugging.
Okay, I'm willing to vote on it. What would people like to do? Who would like to discuss stories? Oh, Kareem, yeah.
I think this could be a good strategy if you could share your own personal comments in class right now about the stories
That would work too, yeah.
And then
Sure.
we would add on comments on Slack when we get to our state.
Sure. Yeah, I can just cycle through. Is that everyone good with that?
Yeah.
Okay, so let me, okay. Yeah, so some of these I had detailed notes. Did everyone watch everyone's stories? No. Okay, so I guess if you haven't watched the stories, you might have to watch this recording and match up what I'm saying with each story. But let's see, so there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stories that were submitted. So I can just go in order of my notes here, which I think is the order that Slack was in. Okay, so the first story I saw was Kareem and Sarul's resubmission of assignment 4. So this was on the kind of drug use and mental health. So first of all, I thought the story came out a lot nicer than the first version. So I thought it was much improved. I thought the introduction last time I had liked it and I still like it. It was pretty similar. I think my so I'll maybe paste in a bunch of my specific comments because they kind of match up to specific moments of the video, but the kind of overarching comment is did a nice job of you had lots of analyses and you visualized them well. But I thought what was kind of missing or what could have taken it to kind of the next level is more interpretation. So you show bar graph with a particular trend, and let's say it's drug use is increasing or mental health issues are increasing over time. In the video, you say things and we plotted mental health issues over time. And sometimes you might say they've increased since 2010 or whatever. But it'd be useful to add a little bit of interpretation there. At one point you had any mental health issue and different age, plotted for different age groups, and they were all plotted over time. And then you had New Hampshire compared to the US. So I thought one way you could have framed that is any mental health issues in 18 to 25-year-olds, which was the most common category. 10 years ago was about as common as for other age groups, but the prevalence of mental health issues in that age group has been increasing way faster. So that gives you some context and interpretation. And it tells us, okay, that's something we want to pay attention to and focus on. This is a recent problem that's getting worse over time. And then the second trend I noticed in those plots is New Hampshire, even over the past, basically over the entire past decade, has had more mental health issues than the US average. So that's something else that could be good to point out. And maybe this is a particular issue that we want to focus on in New Hampshire. And then the other, so that sort of comment came up in a bunch of places. And then the other general comment is like, at one point you broke down, like I said, two other general comments. At one point you were like breaking down trends for males and females, which was interesting. And it looked like there were more mental health issues for females in the data set and more drug abuse like reports for the males in the data set. So that's a potentially interesting, split. But especially because, drug use and mental health issues are correlated. So maybe there's a different pattern there that could be interesting to explore. But you kind of just like flashed them up and then said, here's what the plot is, but then you left it to the audience to figure out what's happening. So sometimes it's useful to kind of explicitly say what you think is going on there. And then right around that same point in the video, you had one set of maps that were colored by on a continuous scale where the colors corresponded to the values and changed systematically across values. And then it looked like there must have been another column in your data set that was coded as strings, probably because it had a percent sign at the end. And I think it would have been useful to convert those to floats. So remove the percent sign and then convert everything to a float. And that would plot things on a continuous scale, which I think would be easier to interpret. And it also looked like some of the plotting was a little buggy, one of the values appeared in two different colors or something like that.
I think if I were to redo it now, I would have paid attention to that. I think at that time, I probably didn't have the same coding. I wasn't as comfortable with the Google Colab.
Sure.
I completely understood because I remember seeing that and being like, oh, I don't know why that's happening. And now that you mentioned that, I just fixed that in one of my stats.
Yeah. So, it's the last day of class. So you could revise it before March 15th, which is, when everything has to be done. But, you could also just think about it and, learn from it moving forward without specifically switching this example. And then at the end, I thought you wrapped things up nicely. So you kind of ended it. You didn't have explicit or direct recommendations of here's how to fix this huge problem that has been going on for over a decade, which makes sense. But you said here are some things that would be interesting to look into based on what we've learned from this analysis. So I thought that was a really effective suggestion. So yeah, so you did a nice job with that. All right. Okay, so we can just barrel on and okay, so the next story was that I saw was also from Kareem, and this time it was with Alex, and it was on it was the happiness and sunshine story. So did everyone get a chance to see that one or no? All right. Well, something to look forward to. So I thought it was a super fun and creative idea, first of all. Just neat question. I thought you motivated it well. I'm happy when it's sunny. That's great. Let's see, let me summarize. Yeah, so again, I have a bunch of time point specific comments that might be useful, most useful, if you're matching it up to the video, but let me try to summarize. Okay, so there were a couple points where I had the same comment as for the previous story, which is you showed a result, but then so you said something here's a map, but then it'd be useful to have an interpretation to go along with that. What's this map showing? So you had sunlight per country, which is a great visualization, but maybe saying something okay, countries near the equator have more sunshine or, something like that could be useful. And then you had an animation, which looked super cool, but but I wasn't clear what the message that I should be taking away was. So that's something else to, think about. Another kind of minor thing, but kind of, do y'all know what the Stroop effect is? If you took like intro psych, so like you see, colors, the words corresponding to colors printed in a font color that doesn't match what the word is. There's kind of a Stroop effect in your presentation where you flipped the axes at some point for some of the plots.
Yeah.
Where like red was the maximum values in some plots and blue was the maximum value in others. And that kind of messed with my head, but just a way to potentially, so mostly within a like variable. So like, your scales were consistent within a variable. So for sunshine, everything went in the same direction. For happiness, everything went in the same direction. But one thing you could do is like have red always be the highest value and blue always be the lowest value. Or another thing you could do is just like if you are plotting fundamentally different things, you could just use different color scales. So instead of red, blue, you could use like purple, green or something. And then, a very minor point, but maybe worth noting is it was like a 10-second comment, maybe even less. You mentioned like some Python libraries you used. And I thought that would be great for like your documentation, but it didn't totally, it felt kind of out of place in the story. And then I thought like the conclusions were neat. Like when you started looking at GDP and happiness, like it was neat that you found stuff. I thought the pattern was cool. Like there did seem to be overlap between the two maps that you were saying there was overlap with. And I liked your closing idea. Like, okay, here's some interesting things we could explore and maybe we could, work towards a map of like the best places to live. I thought that was a neat idea. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Can I ask a question, like the logistical side of things?
Yeah, sure.
Do you know when we submit a story for this final project, will we be able to see a grade before the end of the term, or would we redo the project before receiving that grade?
So for the stories that were already submitted, I'll probably submit your grades either today or tomorrow. I guess moving forward until the 15th, like if, I don't know, usually I need about an hour to grade stuff. So like, I guess if you submit at a time when I happen to be like awake and able to pay attention to it, then I can turn around your grades pretty quickly. If you submit at like, March 15th at like 11 p.m., then you're not going to get a grade before midnight. But yeah, fun read.
And to submit a video, it's basically like a file in My Stories.
And in the data stories
Okay,
folder.
in the data
Yep.
stories.
Yeah, so just submit a pull request, but the most important thing, so that's important to like integrate the story with the rest of the class. The most important thing for the grade is like posting a link to your video. So if you post a link to the video in the Your Stories channel, then I'll be able to grade it. And then if you don't submit it correctly, I can, work with you to get it submitted correctly, but I need at least a video to be able to give you a grade. Yeah, Frank.
I'm on this point completely, it's my fault, but I realized that in syllabus says like there's like requiring 3 data stories.
Yeah. Yes. So yeah. So if you so the way that grading works for the last part of the course is I think the stories are worth a total of 30 points across those 3. The one you do best on is worth 15. The second best is worth 10. And then the third best is 5. In the past, I've kind of tweaked it. If you like only submit 2 stories, then I usually don't give you a 0 for that last piece, especially if you've like done the other assignments. So I might take off a couple points and then grade like the whole thing out of 28 points instead of like, yeah, so like you don't, I want your grade to reflect like your kind of actual performance in the class. Sometimes the syllabus, like if you don't like do the course exactly how I was imagining you to do the course, it might not correspond exactly to like the predefined grading system. If you do every assignment exactly as kind of described, then the grading system works. At least it has over the past 5 or so years. But there's always some like edge case that, I can work with you on. Yeah, so,
So does all this homework must have like share the same topic or anything?
oh, they can be about anything. So, yeah.
You can just submit 2 stories and saying just deducting 2 points of the result.
Yeah, I'll have to look to see what I've done in previous years, but that's my memory is you can, so you get like 3 points for free if you sort of. Let me, if you're worried about not being able to submit 3 stories, why don't you reach out to me and then I'm happy to like abide by whatever policies I've done in past years. So I just have to look it up. I don't remember off the top of my head, but it's something like you'll get like a few points off because I want it to be fair to people who submitted 3 stories, but you don't, like, you're not going to fail if you submit 2 stories instead of 3. Okay. In general, like if you're worried, whatever, just Slack message me and we'll, figure it out. Not looking to fail anyone or anything like that. So, yeah. Okay. Okay. The next story that was submitted was Emily and Allison's assignment 4 resubmission. Yeah.
I also submitted like new code in GitHub, but I don't really know. I don't think it was exactly the right spot. Would you be able to like convert it either? But like just
Yes, I will take a look at that.
Wrong spot.
Okay. Yeah. Could you send me a Slack message to make sure I remember?
Yeah, thank you.
So I really, really liked this this resubmission. I thought it was, yeah, just first of all, much improved and just like really well done story. So I thought there was good motivation at the beginning of the story. Again, sorry if you haven't watched it, these comments will be out of context, but for those who did, there's good motivation at the beginning of the story, which was similar to the last submission, but this time I thought you didn't get bogged down with like too much kind of background detail, like defining terms that people could easily Google and that sort of thing. Also, we hadn't actually discussed this, but it's a really good thing that you converged on, which was like in your background, you kind of foreshadowed your conclusions at the end, which was great. So you were talking about the connection between cholesterol checks and insurance and access to physicians right at the beginning. And then at the end, you had, a data-driven argument for why that link was important. You used scatter plots to illustrate the correlations. I thought that was really effective. And then as you were showing the results, you kind of interpreted. I thought that was a nice balance there. And then your suggestions were like just exactly what the Department of Health folks had asked for. So like, specific, relatively small scale things that they could actually implement that were tied in with other initiatives that the Department of Health was like focused on. So yeah, I thought that was an awesome job. So I didn't have any like things to improve. So yeah, so really nice job there. That was cool. All right. The next submission was with Akia and Sarul. It was on Euphoria. So I thought this was a super creative idea and like a just really neat analysis and approach. So yeah, so that was awesome. For this one, I also had like kind of time point specific comments. Again, I apologize if some of you haven't seen this movie, and in which case you could watch it and then watch the recording of this lecture. I think, yeah, so I have some like time point specific comments of like, tweaks that you could make to particular graphs and that sort of thing. Overall, I thought the like graphical style of the presentation was really awesome. How did you do that? Was it that Figma or?
No, it was like manually, like I kept the graph from this.
Yeah.
CSV thing, and then I manually did like
Like,
line on it, so that.
okay.
But it was really a white.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Cool. Huh. Yeah, that's cool. Well, it looks awesome. And so you can do these sorts of tweaks in Plotly. But it's kind of hard to do. So I was like, I was just wondering how you did it. But yeah, hacked together way that looks good is great. I mean, it worked. The main questions I had were about methods. So I think for Kareem and Sarul's assignment 4 submission, I had said like there were too much focus on methods. I think for this story, so I don't know if I think that with this story, it was maybe an overcorrection. And it felt like in a few places, so you scraped Twitter data, or it seemed like you got tweets somehow. When I was watching it, I was like, how did you do that? Like, did you use the Twitter API? But there were only like, 100 or so tweets. So where did they come from? Because I'm sure lots of people are talking about Euphoria on Twitter. So I was expecting more like maybe on the order of millions of tweets. And then you did a sentiment analysis, super cool. But there are a few ways to do sentiment analysis. So you could like look for particular keywords that you define. You could look for keywords that other people define. You could manually tag tweets. I didn't know how that was done. And then you had like categories of different tweets. And again, like there you could look for keywords. You had a few examples that made me think maybe you did something manual. There's a way to do that sort of analysis automatically, but it's pretty tricky. So I guess if you tag tweets manually, then that explains why you were able to do it. But like I didn't know if you did some sort of natural language processing thing, but yeah, that makes sense. And then another, just like a minor visualization point, you had one bar graph for Nate and one bar graph for McKay. And the x-axis was in a different order for the two graphs. And so usually I don't kind of hold graphs in my head as I'm moving forward in the presentation. I actually thought for this presentation, it made sense. And like you had enough context to like kind of intuit what was going on for the Nate graph, which was first, I think. But then when I got to the McKay graph, I was like, wait, that shape doesn't match up. And so, and then I was like, wait, the order of the x-axis doesn't match up. And so then like, in order to compare mentally, I had to like actually go back in the video. So another thing you could have done is like, if you want to compare the like bar heights between these two characters. You could make a grouped bar plot where you have like both bar plots on the same axis, maybe in different colors for different characters. Or you could even just like show the plots next to each other on the same slide. And that could be helpful. And then I definitely recommend sorting in the same order along the x-axis, because that'll also make it easier to compare. So overall, though, very well done, and appreciated the lack of spoilers. Yeah. Cool. And then the last story that was submitted was Fan Rie's story on color theory, which I thought also was a super interesting creative idea. Did people get a chance to watch this one? No. Okay. So yeah, that's fine. So again, I have like a bunch of time point specific comments that I can post. I think let's see. So what's my summary here? First of all, like some of this stuff I was just interested to learn about. So like I was surprised to learn that different colors cost different amounts. Like, who knew? Yeah. Maybe obvious if you use paints, but yeah. On a computer, it's just lighting up, pixels on the computer screen. So it costs the same amount no matter what color you use.
Actually, for acrylic and like the chemical made paints, they cost the same or similar. Only for the most traditional paints.
I see. Because if it uses like actual earth materials, you were saying. So if you have like crush in a precious gemstone to make your blue color or something. I see.
No, like they are using like more cost-friendly thing for blue, but here they are more expensive than other colors.
Interesting. So for like crayons, I don't know if you know anything about crayon colors, but I was like, maybe Crayola, like when they make a box of crayons, maybe they just like price them based on the average color cost, but I don't know. Or maybe it's just chemical and it all costs the same. Doesn't matter.
It really depends on which brand is it. And like some brands, they think that they made it by hand. And in those kind of brands, you see like a larger price difference in the colors.
That's so interesting. Yeah. So just that was neat. I thought you found a pattern in like US versus non-US brands in terms of the mixes of basically yellow there's more yellow for the US brands. That was a neat pattern that you found. In a few places, you had points that were effectively made based on the visualizations you showed, but they were like screenshots of like a art supply website or things like that. So I thought it was effective, but another way to plot it could have been to like put the data in Python and make like a bar plot or something like that. So it was like those parts of your presentation, I think, were less like data science, like they felt a little less data science-y. So just something to think about. And then like I was when you introduced the story and by the time you got to the end of the story, I was trying to understand like what's the mechanistic definition of like a warmer color and a cooler color? Like, is like if you mix in red, is that warmer? Or if you mix in like gray or blue, is that cooler? Or is there like some way to quantify it? Or
I actually put something in the magnifier.
oh yeah.
Kind of to explain because actually like warm and cool color, they are just like comparatively. And for a warm color, you basically have like 20 or even 100 names for you to choose from. And each of them, they are warm or cool to a different degree. and also depends on the brand and also the year you bought it. So, and in that way, it's really hard to decide, and there is no scientific way to decide on it. So that is a really hard part. So I put in the rating fire. So for the next step would probably be to use a way to quantify like the degree of warmth. But so far, like it's basically by experience.
Yeah.
I have a quick question, because I did watch your video, so I can send you some notes that I took, but I was wondering if like is purple and green not like those kind of colors, orange not included in that professional set? Because your pie chart only had red, blue, and yellow, so I just didn't know if like you didn't count those colors or.
Actually, like normally, like if you want to take a class here, like in our department, they won't give you that much. They probably they won't give you the gray and orange. They are only going to give you a warm and a cool color in the primary colors and 2 earthy color and black and white.
Okay.
So that would help you to learn to mix the color.
I feel like that might have been helpful to add, just because I knew nothing about paint, so I wasn't
Huh.
totally sure, but I thought it was like super cool.
So like so when you buy a professional kit of paints, it's just like you get some reds, some blues and some yellows and like maybe black, white, earthy tones sort
Yes,
of
and
thing.
that's all. Like
That's it.
Yeah, actually, like to be a better artist is like do not indulge yourself in buying too many colors. You need to learn to make your own color.
Wow.
So that's
Huh.
the theory.
Wow. That's so cool. Huh. Yeah. Never knew that. That's cool. Anyways, yeah, neat topic. So yeah, nicely done. Okay, so that was all your stories. Yeah, so seems like they're coming along well. Can definitely see some like improvement relative to your earliest stories. So you're all progressing in a nice direction. So that's awesome. I'm looking forward to seeing your, your final stories. We could spend some time on debugging, maybe for up to 20 minutes. And then I wanted to just have a quick discussion at the end to kind of wrap up the course. So does anyone have any debugging things that? All right, Eliza, I think your hand was up first.
Just was wondering, once you actually made the trajectories, I tried to divide the trajectory and I can like plot the individual trajectory. Just I thought I can also try to, because I can compare it in 2D, but I wouldn't know how to quantify the difference between trajectories. So the problem is that being in 3D is very difficult to understand how to quantify it. But
Sure.
okay, maybe I can, as a reason I can actually compute the correlation in some way, but I don't know whether, because I try to understand the code, but it's very difficult. So I was
Yes.
wondering whether, because the point in 3D space of the coordinates, so I don't know how to compare.
Yes. Okay. So let me, yeah, it takes a little while to run this thing, but
I just actually added, I just added.
you added something.
But that's in my file, not in your file.
Oh, did you just post something?
No,
No, it was Kareem. He just posted another story.
Do you want to post a link, Eliza, and then?
I think I might have sent that
Oh.
story to you personally, but I think I might have had to put it in data store in your source so that.
Got it. Okay, I'll,
I might have missed it, but-
it looks like I did. Yeah, thank you for resending that. So I haven't watched it yet, but
That's fine.
sorry, I missed that. Okay. Oops. Okay, so, oh, cool. Okay, these look like trajectories.
Why the color in scroll down a little bit, yeah, why the color remains blue, although the next one, why it should be associated need to run. So the question would be one, body color is not running.
Oh, yes. So here you have to do like this. And then here it'd be, oops.
Oh, so that's T, the color.
Yeah, this stands for format. Okay, let me run this.
Because also the trajectory is at the same place, it's a little bit different from the one not in
So this one is the better.
where they are different.
I see. Yeah. So you're taking, so I don't know how many dimensions you used, but
Also, the last one should be 5. From what the last graph, so maybe the trajectory is make sure it's 5.
oh, yes. Yep. Yep. Okay. So what you're doing here is you're taking, well, yeah, I don't know if it's worth looping in the whole class about the methods here because they are quite complicated, but you're you're using a natural language processing model to create a like coordinate in a 3D space for each moment of a bunch of TED Talks. And then you have 2 groups of TED Talks. Some are the most viewed TED Talks and some are the least viewed TED Talks. And then you want to know whether the shapes of those trajectories are similar for, the least viewed or most viewed talks. So, okay, so it takes a little while to like set up everything here.
So as I was saying, each stuff is actually related to specific topics and they are quite different. So they actually intersect in just few moments. And at this point, in theory, the trajectories should be different. I mean, they should actually be in different blocks in the space. So when I can describe the trajectories of when I can describe the trajectories, then how can we interpret their plotting in the space? I can, for example, analyze whether they're in a specific region with respect to another. I see, because I was noticing that it's the over 1 hour below the red, which is kind of
well, yeah, so the language model that you're using here has 50 dimensions. And then you're plotting it as a 3-dimensional thing. So one thing that's showing up here is like the red trajectories look like they're in one part of the space and the blue trajectories look like they're in another part of the space. When
the one trajectory is not above, it's not between, it's not among the above. I don't understand.
it's not what?
It's not among the trajectories that are in the space above. It's like should be one of the one block of the above, but it's not there.
Ah, yes. So when you plot a bunch of 50-dimensional shapes in 3 dimensions, it tries to create a 3D space so that everything is kind of. So when you plot a 50-dimensional thing in 3 dimensions, it doesn't look exactly the same as the original thing. So it's a little bit distorted. And when you plot a bunch of 50-dimensional shapes, which you're doing here in 3D, the internal code here is trying to optimize to make the 3D shape that's the most similar to the 50-dimensional shapes as possible. But when you only plot one thing at a time, that optimization is different. And so like if you only have to optimize how one shape looks, then if you were to add in the other shapes onto this axis, they would look more distorted relative to how they look here. You can't directly compare. Yeah.
But I can directly compare one to one.
Within a plot, you can compare one to one. So for example, yeah, so what's happening with the aligned trajectories here is you can see here, let's say this video is about soccer and this video is about fish tanks. Hey, Allison and Emily, could you stop talking? Well,
Can we go outside?
sure, that's fine. Thank you. Okay, so let's say this trajectory is about soccer. This trajectory is about fish tanks. So, because these are about different things, the trajectories don't overlap with each other. The way you can think about this space conceptually is that every point in this space is like a concept that you could be thinking about. And then dots that are points that are nearby each other reflect conceptually related concepts. So if 2 points, so like the reason these trajectories are smooth is that successive points of a narrative tend to be about similar things. And then the reason this trajectory appears over here and this other trajectory appears over here is because this trajectory and this trajectory are about kind of different things.
The thing that I would need to interpret sigma is because the point that I don't understand is how to understand which topic go after which topic. So how topics are on the axis, how are they?
Oh yeah, so there are 50 topics and only 3 axes. So each axis is like a combination of topics. So you can't directly map between them. If you want to be able to know, like for a particular trajectory, what the topics are, then this code up here tells you like the top words in each topic. So that tells you what each of the 50 topics is about. And then you can visualize what a particular trajectory looks like using a heat map. Or let's see.
So I can extract the topics from each trajectory.
Yeah, so okay, so okay, so each column here is a different topic, and then each row is a different time point. So you can see like in the first time point, this topic, which is number, looks like 43, starts out. So then we could ask, okay, for the first video,
Yeah, okay.
what's it about? That's topic 43. So it's about these words. So some kind of project, I guess. A blog.
And is there an easy way to intercept the trajectories and see whether there are common dots, common points?
Across the different trajectories, you
Yes.
could, so you could look at,
Because I thought about computing simply the correlation between between the dots, but then at the same time I thought, okay, completely reasonable given that there's not many trees in top, there's not something I can quantify, it's just dots.
Oops. Let's see. Oh, oops. Okay, so you have 10 videos here. And you can ask for each video, what's the mix of topics for that video? And then you can look at videos that have the same columns highlighted, something like that. So that'll tell you like which videos have shared topics.
So, it doesn't was more understand. So, but what if we could just intersect in this space, find the common points in the space? Although it's 50 dimensions and we are trying to plot 50 dimensions, we can otherwise find the common space and points in the space. Right?
So you can find common points. What do you mean by that? I'm not sure.
Should be intercepting the curves, intercepting the trajectories. And then at that point, the problem is that one point in the space doesn't correspond to one topic, but it corresponds then to the combination of topics, right?
Yeah, yep. Oh, you want to know like if you want to compare like time point by time point across two videos or something like that, or?
I would just ignore time points and say, let's see whether these two talks have a shared point in the space.
Oh, yeah. So you'd want to know like whether this row of things was similar. So
I can't directly state that they are about the same topic, but I can say that this point is shared between two trajectories.
yeah. So you could do something. Oops. Oh. Okay. So you could say oh, okay. So you could look at this. So you could say like, how similar are each pair of videos or something like that.
I can't really understand what's.
Yeah, no worries. Let me just, okay. So, okay, so the diagonal is meaningless here, but each entry tells you for like video 6, what other videos are similar to it. Is that what you're talking about?
Oh, so there's a correlation matrix, right?
Exactly.
So
So,
the diagonal is always right because it's the same talk related to, it's the same correlation between itself.
exactly.
This correlation in terms of what? So are you comparing what specifically?
So it's comparing, so it might be useful to talk about this offline to dig more into it. But it's comparing like the blend of topics that each video is about. How similar is that to the blend of topics that each other video is about? So if a value here is high, like video 1 and 7 are about similar topics. So I don't know what those videos are, but whatever they are, they're about similar things. But video 0 is not really similar to anything else except it's a little bit similar to video 9. Etc. Okay. So for this set of analyses, it's a pretty complicated set of analyses. I think I'm happy to meet with you to figure out how we can, carve this, or like wrangle this thing into a story. It might take a little bit. Yeah. Okay, so I want to wrap things up, but did you have a question, Nakia? Or no, that's okay. Okay, so first of all, if anyone, I'm around for the rest of this week, and I mean, at least until the 15th. So if you want to, if you're like stuck on something and want to reach out, I'm not going to have like specific office hours since the official term, like last day of classes is today, but or tomorrow, I guess. But if you want to chat, if you're stuck on something, I'm happy to. So just reach out over Slack and we can set up a time to do that. And you don't have to struggle and get frustrated on, putting your final stories together. I'm happy to help out with stuff. I wanted to say a few things. So first of all, thank you all for, your like really great work and enthusiasm throughout the term. And I really appreciated your flexibility in starting the term remotely. And I'm glad we got to meet in person, at least for the last part of the class. But yeah, thank you for accommodating my family's health concerns. I thought I wanted to kind of leave us with is like, back on the first day of this course, we started by framing data science as a way to get at truth. And now you've worked with a few different data sets. And I was just curious whether the experience you've had digging into some data sets has changed your perspective at all about what you think about truth and data, or like about how you know, how you feel about like data-driven reporting or anything along those lines, or like whether we can know truth, given the kind of mismatch between what you often want to know and the data set that you often have that you want to tell you about what you know. Yeah, Kareem.
I feel like one of the big takeaways I had is that, especially with the whole like how you could drop like NA values or filter through data. I mean, you could have a data set where you have 1 million data points and I don't know, like 90% of them are NA, and you drop that and only focus on the 10%. And that gives you this like trend or correlation that you end up saying like this is what how these two things correlate, but you're not accounting for like 90% of the entire data set. And hypothetically, if they weren't like NA values, it could be completely different. So that's something that I found really shocking, that there's so many
Yeah.
data sets that you don't really know if it like captures the whole picture.
Yeah, so data pre-processing, what data you include in analysis, that's going to have a huge effect on the conclusions you draw. But what about like, I think we experienced this with the Department of Health data. Like, we had like representatives from the Department of Health come in and say, here are all these interesting questions. And then they gave us a data set which had like maybe peripheral relevance to the sorts of questions, but like, that's the data they have. So like, it's not like there's any magic. It's like, that's what's available. And from that, you have to answer all the questions that you want to answer. Yeah, Emily.
I also feel like because you're like telling a story, like you don't want to include things that like aren't as relevant or maybe don't fit like the narrative you're trying to say. So that's like I feel like a big thing. Like if you are including correlations and like there's one that doesn't really have a correlation, like you could include it, but then also maybe like detract from the stories that people are like it could be showing the opposite. And people like might leave things out because it doesn't fit the kind of story they're trying to tell.
Yeah, so that's important to like, carry your inner skeptic with you. So like, what aren't people telling you? Because yeah, if you see an article in the New York Times when they're like, A is related to B or causes B, now you know the secret sauce that goes into that. It's like they're working with the same kinds of data sets you've worked with. They're doing the same sorts of tweaks or analyses that you have done. It's nothing magic. So like, yeah.
Close to 10 correlations, and then we're like, oh, we really only need to include like 2 of them.
Yeah.
So then it's like, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I find that kind of terrifying. It's like, the story you present to the world doesn't actually necessarily even correspond to reality. Yeah, Allison.
I feel like though, like, even though the data is limited, it's like, I feel like it's kind of the best we have. Like, it reminds me a little bit like in some of like the consulting interviews, like when they ask you questions and you're kind of like making up hypotheses and you're kind of like guessing random numbers. And like, I guess I was always the sort of person being like, oh, I don't know, like, can I just try to actually find data to tell you? Or like, I like, at least for this class, when we presented things, we actually have data to back it up. It's not just our opinion or conjectures. And I just think that gives more credibility.
Yeah, so it's not completely unconstrained, but then there are lots of ways to interpret
That's true.
data.
Too.
So,
But it's not as much your, right, I mean, you can, I guess, interpret however you want, but it's not as much your opinion. Like, I feel like in other subjects, like sometimes it's like, well, this philosopher says this, so like, or your basis of your argument is something that's like religion or something like that's really hard to dispute because everyone has their own beliefs. For data, like that can be more basis for. Like,
yeah, so it's a tricky thing because on one hand, like the kind of, if you think about what are the degrees of freedom that you have when you tell a story or make your argument. So if you're telling a data-driven story or making a data-driven argument, the perception is that like you're so constrained with your degrees of freedom that like you have to get at truth because it's data. So that's like real measurements from the universe that Mother Nature has like handed down to us. And so that's what truth is. Like we just accept what the universe provides to us and then report on it. But the reality is, and so like, I think the perception is like the flexibility there might be some flexibility in like whether you make your bar graph blue or red, but like the result is going to be the same. The reality is like actual data storytelling is much more akin to like just completely making it up and
Right.
like choosing what analyses you do, choosing what data sets you look at, choosing how to plot the results, throwing out the stuff that doesn't fit with your story. And that's the stuff that you're actually getting from the world. So I think, it's good to know about it, and also disconcerting when you trust sources like news reporting sources, and you see a presentation from a scientist and you think, oh yeah, like science, that's truth. But this is how it works. So you can go in hopefully with some more skepticism and think about like, wait, this doesn't make sense. How could they have done this analysis even? Like now you know how to implement an analysis, so you can say, is this a possible thing? Like you can start to logic through. So yeah, hopefully, well, yeah, it takes time to like build up intuitions about this stuff, but I think, you at least have the initial tools. And so I hope you'll keep thinking about this stuff. The other thing that I wanted to say, it's not directly related to this class, but many of you are seniors and graduating soon. And I think, it's a scary time out in the world right now. And for a lot of reasons, there's the pandemic, the mess in the Ukraine, and all kinds of societal problems. And the, job market is rough. And I think one of the pieces of advice that I think is really valuable that I wanted to, point you to is I don't know if you saw Barack Obama's graduation address from 2020, a couple of years ago. But one of the lines that he had was the advice to take a few years during this super messy time. You can't control how old you are. This is your reality. You can't control what's going on in the world. So this is the reality of your situation. But you can take a few years after you graduate to just try to learn and not specifically further your career. So many Dartmouth students have been going from, near birth to now, you work your butt off and you get you got to get your A's in kindergarten so that you can get into the fast track in first grade, and then et cetera, until you get to the right high school, and then that gets you to the right college, and now you have to get the right job. But it doesn't have to be like that, and it may not be possible for you to continue on that track after you graduate. That's just it. The world, the rules of the game have shifted, and that's not fair to you, but that's the reality. And it's worth, I would suggest, taking some time to not further your career. Just be a substitute teacher, or go work on a farm for a couple of years, or do something totally random, join Peace Corps or something. Yeah, totally random. That's you don't know where it's gonna go. It's not furthering a goal. Just stepping back can be a nice way of keeping yourself going when your linear trajectory is interrupted. Oh yeah, park ranger. That's another, that'd be fun.
Are you
Yeah.
saying avoid burnout or
Well, avoid burnout, but also if you can't, if the direct path to your career fast track is not possible, or it's going to be blocked anyway because of world circumstances that are outside of your control.
COVID.
For example, or I mean, your college experiences were all quite disrupted, and it's the current state of the world is different from what it's been in past, for past generations of Dartmouth seniors, for example. And like, I mean, you can ignore that, or you can kind of roll with it and use it as a learning opportunity and say like, okay, well, I'm not gonna hit my goals at the same times necessarily, but you never know what you can learn from. And like, you know, the experiences you get over the next couple of years might, you know, put your life in a new direction or be valuable learning opportunities. You never know how they'll come in handy. So I would think about that. Also, you know, use your Dartmouth education. So like, you know, you've got the skills that you learn in your classes, and that's useful. But you also have learned to like balance your schedule. So you're all doing like a million extracurricular activities. You're in clubs and sports and like you're doing crazy things for the world and all that. So it's not usually acknowledged that like usually the way that professors frame learning is like classroom learning is the highest ideal. And then the other stuff is kind of a distraction from it. But I think the process of like having to balance, like how do you maintain friends in a pandemic when you have a million other activities? That is a skill set, and that's gonna, like, you've learned there, and that's gonna be valuable moving forward. So like keep thinking about how did you balance now, and how is that, those sorts of skills gonna carry you forward. Let's see. Yeah, and you're gonna find like, you know, right after you graduate, basically the grades that you get, like your need to get an A on everything, that is not gonna matter anymore. No one's gonna care. That's sometimes shocking. That was shocking to me.
Not even for PhD.
Well, it matters
No,
less
I
and
mean-
less. Yeah, it matters less and less.
Yeah, it's actually like in graduate school, you only have pass, no pass, sometimes high.
That's
pass.
right.
I just mean like to
It's
get
like-
in, not like.
Yeah. So getting into law school and med school and a PhD program, that is the one set of, yeah. So many, if you're going to like a postgraduate thing, then your grades will matter. Once you're there, they stop mattering. So they're going to stop mattering soon. And then also, like, you know, as you think about your next steps after Dartmouth, if there are things that I can do, so like particularly if you're like wanting to go in a data science direction, like that's where most of my connections are. But so I'm happy to connect you with people, and you know, that could be bouncing around ideas. If you want to reach out, like I'm thinking about this type of job, how do I get it? If you want me to connect you with people that, you know, use me as a resource there, I can write letters of recommendation, et cetera. You know, that's another benefit of the like Dartmouth network, is like you get looped into other people who also have connections. So I would encourage you to use that. So that's all I've got. Thank you so much for a nice class this term, and hope you'll stop by if you're in the area again, or want to say hi. And
Where's
yeah,
your office?
it's 349.
Okay, so similar to-
Yep, right down the hall.
We are going to meet you in the office already this week. Are we going to meet in person? or-
We're gonna do Zoom. So yeah, so I'm gonna be on Zoom for starting tomorrow. So back to my hermit-like existence. All right, everyone,
Thank you.
take care. Thank you. Yes, let me,